Good day. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. Most of you that have been listening to me for a long time know my story. Minded my own business in the software industry 20 years ago. My wife and I married later, two small kids, all four parents still alive in their 80s. We think they're doing great. Then all of a sudden in the summer of '05, the phone starts ringing and they're not doing well. So we wind up moving into a care journey for all four of them that lasts 14 years. I realize I can barely spell the word care, start doing as much research as I can, start my first company, Points of Life, start educating folks locally and then eventually nationally about the complexities of aging and care. Started this podcast now about 2 years ago. And then we have a really special guest with us today. About a year and a half ago, I had a gentleman by the name of Peter Ross on this podcast, and we were talking about his company, Senior Helpers. And then that led us to another conversation, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. And first of all, I want to bring Peter on. Are you there?
Hey, Richard, I'm definitely here and I'm happy to be on board.
Well, thank you. And so if you can give our audience kind of a background of you and starting Senior Helpers and what that's been like for 20 plus years now.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, Richard. I had a challenge with my mother as she aged and trying to find care when I lived in New York, and she lived in up in Portland, Maine, where I was born and from, and could not find care and could not find reliable in-home care for her. And I was eventually had to move her to a facility, which was a very nice facility, but certainly not something that she really wanted to do. So that, was really kind of the motivation for me when I worked with was working with my partner, Tony Bonacus, who co-founded Senior Helpers with me. We both wanted to start a business together. And we wanted to find out what was the type of business we wanted to get in. And over lunch, we had challenged ourselves to bring 5 business ideas to that lunch to see what we wanted to do this was way back in 2001.
Wow.
And what happened then was, when we went to the lunch, we came up with the idea of senior care. And that was really kind of the birthplace of Senior Helpers. And 2002 opened our first location. I opened a location. He was in Baltimore, where I'm sitting right now, but he was started first. I helped him with that, and then I started 2 years later in Southern California. And then once both those operations were working and profitable, we decided that we wanted to franchise, which was our goal originally, and started franchising in 2005. And fast forward 20 years, we have more than 400 locations in 46 states, Australia, and Canada. So it's been an amazing journey. So,
Yeah, that's fantastic. So before we start talking about a plan to age, I mean, how have you seen the in-home care market change in over 20 years?
well, I think it's becoming a lot more known. When I first started it, there were 14 other competitors who had started franchising in-home care, and so we were the number 15. There's now almost 70 of them. But I think back then, aging wasn't impacting people enough across the entire population. It was kind of like no one wanted to talk about it. But then all of a sudden, as the sandwich generation and people were starting to age, and baby boomers started turning 65, so we had to do a lot more of education back then, to educate people what really was home care and how does it let you remain independent by getting those services in your home to take care of your loved ones so they can age in place, which is where they want to be, which is where my mother wanted to be. So that was back then. So yeah, that over the years, we now have a much more I think, educated society on home care and personal care services. People are now dealing with aging parents and grandparents and becoming a challenge for how they live their life. And so I do think that evolution of perception of what it was originally to now, I would call it more reception of what they really do need in life to really help them out has come a long way. I think the training, I always tell people we're non-clinical, highly skilled. Medicare used the terminology of what we used to do as non-medical, non-skilled. Those I don't like two negatives; they don't make a positive in this case. So
Sure.
I I really like the idea that we're really creating a highly skilled workforce to really take compassionate and compassionate care of seniors and their families, and I think now to the point we have more demand than we've ever seen. You got 80 million baby boomers that are starting to turn 80 next year, so the tsunami is here. And I think that Senior Helpers provides that, that ability to let your loved ones age in place, so that they can really live out their life and the dignity and the health of their own home. And we provide that opportunity for them to do that.
No, which is fantastic. And as we've talked, you've given some of the statistics that we talk about. I mean, things have changed in 20 plus years since you've been doing this and 20 years that I've been doing this. And we're seeing definitely an aging population. The boomers that are turning 80, the numbers out there show there's over 100 million people in this country that are 50 and older. And one of the things that concerns me, and we'll get to a plan to age, is the fact in all the education I was doing through all the years and standing in front of people, there just wasn't an understanding of what the complexities are of aging. What does that mean? What are options for care? What does care actually cost? How do I pay for that? And it goes on and on. Why do I and my family need an estate plan? What is that? What's probate? What's a will? What's a trust? Why should I be saving for care? And care is expensive, whether it's going to be in the home or be at a community. So that frustrated me over the years. Yeah, I literally stood in front of thousands of people. Got a long way to go, but I could see that most of them, this was really a new subject. And now, as we age, so if we wind the clock back about a year and a half, Peter is on the podcast in January, February of last year. It's a great episode. Then we talk again after the podcast, and I present this crazy idea to him about a national conversation on aging. Not even sure where I was going with that conversation. I'll let Peter, I don't want to put words in his mouth, what he heard from me and what he potentially liked, because a year and a half later, we have a plan to age that has been launched. What were your feelings when I said that a year and a half ago, Peter?
Well, Richard, I thought it was an interesting idea that obviously we formalized over time. I think we wish we could have done it quicker.
Yes.
Obviously, it's been a road to navigate through, but it's something that it resonated when we talked before and after the podcast that I get asked a lot all the time by friends, and when I travel, I wear my Senior Helpers logoed outfits, and and people look at me and say, I'm in a situation. What should I do? And I think it's just so complex, which is why I think people don't want to pay attention. There's two reasons why people don't do this. One, we live in a world that procrastination is king sometimes, and you kind of even in our business, we get frustrated sometimes when families have their loved one who's becoming have challenges with certain things, and and they don't do anything about it while those challenges are happening until, mom or dad takes a tumble down part of the stairs
Yeah.
and they break something, and then they're forced into the process. And my whole point was, why aren't people more proactive? Why are people waiting, for someone to have an episode that it becomes really, um, you know, it's just really kind of, it's an emergency situation. And so I think that's, one of the things that you and I have always talked about and in our country, we plan our vacations down to the minute and day of the vacation. Here's where we're going here, and here's what times the flights are, and here's what this is at. And we're staying at this hotel, and we got this tour over here. We got the sunset cruise on this day. I'm sitting there going, we spend so much effort, which when I go vacations, I try to get organized as well. But why do we not, to me, your retirement is your longest vacation, right?
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
that's,
and that,
go ahead.
no, I'm saying that, to me, it was always perplexing why people don't, be proactive. Why aren't people, planning their legal structure? Why aren't people looking at their home when they're growing up and having kids? And, when they get older and they're living on a house, like my sister, who had a Cape Cod house with a bathroom on the second floor and a laundry in the basement. And, all of a sudden she had to fall on the stairs. Wonder why? Because the house wasn't really prepared for her to live there that
Yeah.
whole time. So there's just so much, Richard, and I think I always talk about I've done a lot of businesses, all in healthcare from a franchise perspective, and I always really call them mission driven for profit. And we're here to make a difference and let people age in place. Why can't those golden years truly be golden? How can we make this a really, you work so hard your life, you raised families, you've done all these things. Why can't we make this journey more, um, you know, less challenging, I guess would be a way to say it. I think
Yeah.
that's where that the light bulb went on and said, we've got to find a way to help people navigate their aging journey. And one way to do that is create a website that's free to everybody called A Plan to Age.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on it too. I mean, I go back to myself and my wife. I don't think we're stupid people. We're educated. So the summer of '05, we realize we have four parents in their 80s. Someplace in our mind, they're doing well. We've never really sat with them and had a comprehensive family conversation, as we call it, about what's going to happen when, what's going to happen if. Who do they want taking care of them? Where do they want that care taking place? Do they have the finances to pay for it? And then, I don't, do we think that magic was somehow going to take care of them if something happened to them? I don't know. And then you also bring up the vacations, and I somewhat get that. That's fun. On the East Coast, maybe it's the Bahamas. On the West Coast, it's Hawaii. It's planning to the restaurants, like you say, and the beach, and the convertible you're going to rent, and all of it. That's fun. This is not fun. But what I've been telling people, and I know you have as well, it is reality. I mean, I remember 10 plus years ago when I was doing it, a lot of the education, I read someplace that kids born 10 plus years ago may live well into their 100s, 120 or beyond. I mean, what are we going to do? First of all, do people have money to live on? Second of all, if that were to happen, who's going to take care of them? We obviously have a lot of people now that are over 100, and unfortunately, so many families have never really had this comprehensive conversation. So when we started A Plan to Age, and all the talking you and I had over a year was, yes, we want to help people plan, but we also realize that, let's say we do a great job there, so many people will still deal with this in crisis, and we wanted to make sure that we gave them the navigation, gave them the assistance, gave them the help they needed. If they're already getting that, used to be a phone call, now it's probably a text that mom is in the ER, something is broken, and maybe it's a hip. What are your thoughts on that, Peter?
A lot. I mean, it's just so frustrating, I think, as people that are in the industry and people that have gone through the experience that people can't have those family conversations. I mean, in my mother's, situation, I mean, she was organized. I mean, there's certain things we had to do as she aged, but she was, prepared for here's where the money is, here's where this is, here's where that is. She was very well organized from that perspective. Not all the stuff when it comes to the care options and things like that, because I don't think at that point people knew. This was back in the 90s. And so I think that's the part, Richard. I think you and I and Steph and the team have really tried to find a way to get these tools to people. I've done radio shows and interviews and get asked, what are things you should look for in your loved one to know that there's something that needs to be helped. What are legal ramifications? What are financial ramifications? I always feel that some families, the children, I think are, look out for the best interests of their parents and their grandparents, but there's some people and families that look at their parents and say, "Oh, that house is mine someday."
Yeah, I've heard that
Um,
too.
and so you have to kind of work on all those situations. But the challenge is that when you wait so long, Richard, your options start to narrow. I think because you're in crisis versus able to really properly plan. So you're kind of doing firehouse management versus really trying to proactively say, okay, we're going to get our house modified to make this happen. We're going to make sure we take all the fall risk out of it. We're going to start looking at types of things we can do to legally formalize my health directives, my private trust, or my wills, and all those fun things. And as I get older, what are my options for my kids? It's interesting. I think if you talk to seniors, and my mother and dad were the same way, but I would say that, they don't want to be a burden to the children. So and that's sometimes the challenge with getting care for them because they don't want to ask
Yeah,
when they need the help that they need. And I think the other part is that no one told us when we were born that we would have to take care of our parents. We thought we'd have to take care of our children. That was a given, just like they took care of us. But I think that society, community, you gave a lot of numbers and stats. I mean, I was in D.C. last week talking to members of the Health and Human Services, politicians, and talking about this tsunami that's here, and what does it mean to Medicare? What does it mean to Medicare Advantage? What does it mean to the government? How are they going to really help in this communities? Medicaid support, all the things that are all in the press today on how are the government. To me, it's this whole challenge for all of us. There's got to be a private public kind of solution because there's so many aspects. You mentioned being born in the last 10 or 20 years that your life expectancy is up in this 100 and plus range. Think about the communities, think about healthcare, think about disease management, chronic care management. Most seniors have 60% of seniors have at least one chronic illness. So as you look at what that means, but then when you reach the age of 65 today in this country, you have a 23 and a half year life expectancy. And that's only going to go up over time. So to your point, getting into that hundreds, there's more people over 100 today than ever. But what's the quality of life during that time? What can we do for them to how do we kind of, get ahead of diseases and things like Alzheimer's and dementia? I think most seniors will tell you is that they'd like to live as long as they can, as long as they have a mind and they're fairly healthy through that process. So there's just a lot of challenges. And what happens with the family caregivers, Richard, now, years ago, there might have been 10 to 14 family caregivers for every person that needs help. That number is down to like 3. So you don't have that, that kind of infrastructure from a family perspective to really help to support all the things that they need to do as they age. So it becomes a challenge across the board for the care recipient, to the family itself, and then dealing with the dynamics around that. And then who are the trusted advisors that can help you, through this process to know what my legal ramifications are, what my financial ramifications are. What type of care options do I have? Who pays for the care?
Yeah. Yeah.
All those things is what we try to do with a planned age.
No, and you've kind of led me perfectly, folks. What we're trying to do, so let's go back a year and a half. And I say this, what we're doing is a national, excuse my voice, what we're doing is a national conversation on aging. Well, starting next month, we actually have a date and time, Tuesday, July 29th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We are launching the very first national conversation on aging. It's going to be a Zoom call. We want as many people attending that call as possible. We will send out a broad invitation. What is the purpose of the call? It's everything that Peter and I have just been talking about. I would love to get people in this country. This is a daunting task. I'm talking millions of people to be able to have a conversational level conversation, not deep, just at that conversational level about what it means to age, what is care, what are the options? What does it cost? How do I pay for it? As I mentioned before, what is an estate plan? Why is it important in my life? What's it going to do to my family if I die intestate? What is probate? What's a will? What's a trust? What do they do? How are they different? Why, when I first start making money in my younger years, should I start saving for care? Folks, if it costs what it does now, what is it going to be in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? We're going to have this conversation every quarter moving forward. In addition to that, and Peter was talking about this, his trip to Washington last week, we're putting together an advisory council that Peter is part of. We want the top people in this country engaged in conversation as well. What changes do we need to make? As he was talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare Advantage, care itself, the legal process, there's so much to talk about. How are we, simple question with a real complex potential answer, how are we going to house and care for over 100 million people that are 50 years of age and older? We need to get, this is what Peter and I have been talking about for a year and a half. We need to get people thinking. We need to get leaders in many industries coming together to realize we have never been in this position as a country before. Parents had a lot of fun after World War II making a lot of babies. But now all those babies, and it's still at 72, it's hard to believe that the oldest are just about to turn 80. I mean, it was hula hoops and yo-yos when we were young, and that's not the case anymore. So as Peter, I mean, this national conversation on aging, this education you were talking about years ago, I was talking about trying to get people to understand, you know, we age, we get older, and then maybe that'll change somewhere down the line where we won't fall, we won't get ill. But as far as I know now, that just happens. And it'll never be easy when you're taking care of someone. Peter knows that. I know that. But by planning ahead, it can certainly be easier. Thoughts, Peter?
I think having that quarterly, discussion on the national conversation, how to have the conversation with families, which is so important, because I think that's the hard, sticky part is it's hard to have conversations with people, when it's a difficult topic. So I think that's always been the challenge, and trying to educate people more has been, how do you set the stage for that? How do you even begin? I think one of the benefits on the Plan to Age website is ability to download that family conversation template so that you can have that conversation. You can prepare for that conversation. In 2030, there'll be more people over the age of 65 than under 18. First time it's ever happened in our country and the planet. And I think that to me is, something to say, well, we've got to find a way to have these conversations to help people be proactive with this. We've got to find a way to have that conversation and earlier. And I challenge people that are in their, 40s and 50s, even younger to some extent, to, you talked about saving for later. I think that's one thing, but certainly starting to look at, okay, what's it going to be like? If you put things off and put them off and you put them off and you put them off, you're going to be basically behind the eight ball and trying to figure out things as they happened. It's almost like play by play at a game. You're at the game and everything's happening right in front of you. You're
Yeah.
not controlling the game. You're just broadcasting it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a better way to do that. And I think having those conversations and making this website available and continuing to improve on the website to bring more resources to families. The key we're asking for everybody out there is just share. Let people know a plan number two age dot, it's the letter, number two, dot, age.org. Let people know that exists. Have them, share it. There's no cost. You don't even have to put an email in.
It's very simple. And if as we get ready to wrap up, folks, I mean, hopefully you'll take part in our national calls, but if there's something you do via our website, we literally teach you how to have that family conversation, whether it is the adult child reaching up to mom, dad, grandparents, whether it's grandparents, mom and dad, to their adult children. Once you understand how to have it, it's not that challenging. When you're thinking about it and having this conversation with mom or having this conversation with dad, yes, it can be daunting, but it's so important, as Peter was talking about. It is, again, so much easier when, like a vacation, like so many things in our life, things are planned out. And when someone's health changes, the the plans will have to change. I get that. But first, understanding what you're looking at. Mom lives in pick a city, Cincinnati. You live in Houston. What's going to happen if that care has to be provided by you and a spouse or a partner for mom? How is that going to work? How are you going to alter your life? How are you going to keep your job? These are things that need to be talked about. So when something does happen, and unfortunately, it usually does. There is a plan. You are prepared, and it can make it a lot easier on you. And if there's a family around you, your family as well. As we get ready to depart, Peter, any final thoughts?
No, Richard, I think this has been a great discussion. I think we've come a long way in that year and a half. It seems like just yesterday. That's how time flies.
I agree.
As you age. But yeah, I hope the audience, I hope people will embrace the concept that, this is a process that luckily we're all going to go through. And I think if we looked at our aging journey as a vacation, we would be so much better prepared
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it. I think because you'd actually look forward to it. I think that's one of the challenges I think in aging in general is that, there's just a negative connotation to aging, which is why people never want to talk about it. We all know where the end is. We just don't know when it's going to happen. And it's important that while we're here, it's almost like carpe diem, seize the moment, seize the day, find a way to, begin to plan that journey. Vacations, I know there's a lot of people that like to do oh, let's just wing it vacation. I haven't really done one of those, but it sounds kind of cool. That's okay for a weekend. It's okay
Yeah,
for a week. It's not okay for 20, 30, 40 years.
yeah,
So I think that's part of what I would leave the audience with, is the passion that you and I have is Plan to Age is a not-for-profit or, organization. We're not doing it because of money. We're not doing it because of profit. We're doing it because we care. I always believe you want to change the world. And Richard and I have been very fortunate with our careers and what we've been able to do. And it's a way of giving back. It's a way of providing a resource that would have helped him and I in our situations. And I can tell it would help a lot of people in the current situations. That's why Senior Helpers and myself as an advisory council member, not just on the board. And I think it's so important that people realize that planning, it's almost like when I back into Boy Scouts, be prepared.
yeah. No,
You have to have that preparation to have a successful anything in life. You want to have an opportunity to really get to a plan of what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. I thank the audience for listening. I thank the audience for caring. And I hope the audience will let people know about a plan page .org. It's there for everybody. It's free. And there's ways of making aging much more coordinated and planned so that your loved one and yourself will have a journey that you can be proud of and feel very controlled, for as much control as you possibly can. Thanks, Richard.
that's perfect. And I really thank you, Peter. And please share this, our audience, with all those around you, family, friends, church colleagues, business colleagues. It's an extremely important conversation. And as we've talked about, there's so much more to come with a plan to age. We want you to be part of that journey with us as we help people across the country prepare. Doesn't have to be a tough time in your life or the individual that you're caring for. Let's make it as peaceful and as pleasant as we possibly can. Folks, have yourself a great day, and we'll be back in touch. Thank you.